Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well.
St. Anselm of Canterbury's Proslogion ends with 3 chapters that to some degree seem outside of the scope of the unum argumentum, the single argument that he says he's communicating in the work. And indeed, he calls the first of these, chapter 24, a conjectatio, a speculation or conjecture. And he's using his mind to try to think about what the great good that we human beings could in fact enjoy in being connected with and enjoying God, probably in the next life, not going to be realized in any full sense here in this one. What would this actually be like? And he's going to go into a lot of interesting ideas about what this unified good and all of its aspects will be. So chapter 24 is actually quite short. 25 and 26 are longer. So he's going to say, lift up your whole understanding, consider as best you can what sort of good this is and how great it is. If particular goods are delightful, consider intently how delightful, delectabile, pleasurable, is that good which, now notice what he says here. It isn't that it contains all other goods. That is true, but it contains the delightfulness or joyfulness, jucunditatem, right? The taking joy in all other goods. So this is a good that not only includes the other goods, it includes the joys of the other goods. And he's going to say, this is not such joyfulness as we have experienced in created things. It's as different as the Creator differs from the creature. So the Creator is God. The joy that we can take in God is going to be radically different, beyond, greater. He says, if created life is good, how good is the life that creates? We're getting to the source of things. If salvation that's been brought about is joyful, how joyful is the salvation that brings about all salvation? If wisdom in the knowledge of created things is desirable, how desirable is the wisdom that created all things from nothing? So in each of these cases, we're going from what it is that we're used to experiencing to its ultimate source. So he says, if there are many and great delights and delightful things, what kind and how great of a delight is there in him who made these delightful things? So a consistent line of argument being traced out there. And then he's going to pull out all the stops in 25. And what we're going to see is he's going to come up with justifications for each of these. You can call them parts of happiness if you like, because that is a term that Anselm will use in other works like the Dicta Anselmi or the De Similitudinibus, works that haven't actually been translated into English. He also has a sermon, by the way, on the parts of happiness. So in 25, he's going to tell us about these different goods. The one good in which are all good things. What do we get or what can we look for if we seek out that good? So beauty, pulchritudo, right? If it's beauty that delights you, the righteous will shine like the sun. So he's quoting scripture there. If it's swiftness or strength or the freedom of a body that nothing can withstand, they will be like the angels of God. It is sown an animal body, but it will rise a spiritual body. So he's clearly here talking about an afterlife, and not a bodily-less afterlife, but a resurrected body afterlife here. Long and healthy life. If you're looking for that, there is a healthy eternity, and eternal health for the righteous will live forever, and the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. If it's satisfaction, then you're going to get that. They will be satisfied when the glory of God has appeared. If it's drunkenness, inebritas, right? Intoxication, we might say, they will be drunk with the abundance of the house of God. If it's music, well, you're going to get music as well, right? He says, the choir of angels sing unceasingly to God. There's this idea that a divine liturgy is being carried out all the time in heaven. Pleasure, no, not just any pleasure, not impure pleasures, but good pleasures. Well, if it's pleasure you're looking for, there's going to be that. God will give them to drink of the torrent of his pleasures, from the Psalms. If it's wisdom, the very wisdom of God will show itself to them. And there's a few other that we get here a little bit later that we do want to bring up, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So wealth or honor, God will set his good and faithful servants over many things. Indeed, they will be called sons of God and gods. He goes on as well. So why take a pause there? So we've got all these really cool goods that we would enjoy. It sounds really great. He's provided short explanations of why you would actually enjoy those. And then we get to somewhat longer and more interesting explanations. Friendship. We will enjoy friendship. Why? Because they will love God more than themselves and one another as themselves, and God will love them more than they do themselves, for they will love God and themselves and one another through God, and God will love himself and them through himself. So everybody will be loving everybody else who is enjoying this good, and they will do so through God. And this will happen because God, in some sense, through God's love, is helping them to love each other. Concord, concordia, right? A certain arrangement of wills. There will be one will among them all. This doesn't mean that God is going to take away everybody's will and turn them into automatons. There will be no will among them but the will of God. Everyone will naturally will what it is that God wills for them to will. They will have what Anselm calls justice in that case. Power, well, everyone will be omnipotent, meaning that there will be no limitations on their power through their wills, just as God is through his, just as God can do what he wills through himself. They will be able to do what they will through God. You can say, well, what if they want to sin? They're not going to will to sin. That would be ridiculous in a case like that. And this leads to the security part. If it's really security you want, they can be certain they will never lose this security or this good. Why? They would never give it up voluntarily. They would never will to give it up, and there's no other way to lose it. God's not going to take it away against their will from those who love them, and nothing more powerful than God can separate them from God against their will. So we have all of these really interesting characteristics of beings, or we could say of their enjoyments, and he's going to talk then about the happiness, the beatitudo that they enjoy. And it's going to be multiplied. So, if it was just you and God, the way that some people seem to picture a relationship with God, not the way Anselm at all pictures it, or really any of the early or medieval Christians do, picture it communally, you're going to have a great time with God. But what if there's others there involved, which we already see there are. Everybody's got the same will. We've got friendship. Well, what is it like when, you're not suffering from envy or other sorts of issues, when you see somebody who you care about rejoicing? You give them a good birthday present, right? Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I wanted. I'm so happy. That makes you happy, right? Anselm goes on and he says, surely if someone else who you loved in every respect as yourself had the same happiness, your joy would be doubled. You would rejoice no less for him than for yourself. And if 2 or 3 or many more had the same happiness, you would rejoice as much for each of them as you would for yourself, if you loved each one as yourself. So in the perfect charity of countless happy angels and human beings, then there will be, almost infinite multiplication of rejoicing. And what does this mean? Could we really enjoy something this much? Anselm says, your finite human capacities can't actually take in and make sense out of that much joy, right? Their whole heart, cor, mind, mens, and soul, anima, are too small for the greatness of their love. They will truly rejoice so much with their whole heart, mind, and soul that their whole heart, mind, and soul will be too small for the fullness of their joy. Now, that sounds like a problem, doesn't it? Oh, it's going to be so great that you can't possibly take it all in. And that's going to be addressed in chapter 26. How is it possible to have that much joy? He says that I have found a joy that is full and more than full. Indeed, when the heart, the mind, the soul, and the whole human being are filled with that joy, there will still remain joy beyond measure. The whole of that joy will therefore not enter into those who rejoice. Instead, those who rejoice will wholly enter into this joy. That joy itself is God. And so God contains, right? And the human beings, not only each one is contained in their joy, their entire being within God, but the entire community of human beings and the angels is as well. So what an interesting vision of what something like heaven would be like. And as a side note, a lot of people, when they hear about Christians' ideas of heaven, they often say to themselves, well, that sounds like a boring place. Who the hell would want that? Playing harps, flitting around in the clouds, occasionally meeting up with God or your dog, if dogs go to heaven, or, your grandma or things like that. Wouldn't that get really dull really quick? Well, it would. But the way that actual Christians like Anselm, a monk, think about and talk about heaven isn't like that at all. It's this infinite joy that has all these components to it that is shared with other people through God. So he's going to conclude this by saying, although I can't enjoy this fully in my life, I pray that I might grow day by day until my joy might come to fullness. So what does that look like? He says, let the knowledge of you grow in me here. Let your love grow in me here. And then, I will actually have joy growing in me as well. And then he says, let me move from just hope. My joy here is great in hope, in spe, and there it will be full in reality, in re, in actuality, we might say. So, what should he do until then? What's the program, you might say? Let the mind ponder or meditate. Let the tongue speak. Let the heart love. So again, we see love and understanding going along. The mouth proclaim. sort of reiteration of the tongue speaking. The soul hunger, the flesh thirst, two forms of desire expressed metaphorically. And he's going to continue saying, let my whole being long for it until I enter into the joy of God. So this is Anselm's, you could say, vision at the very end of the Proslogion for what human joy could in fact look like, understood in this way, through a God who now is somewhat better grasped and loved and desired through the rest of the Proslogion. Now, is this part of the unum argumentum? I actually, and many other Anselm scholars, would say, no, this is in addition to it. These are conjectures. But they rely upon what was developed through the unum argumentum, which was supposed to not only show us that God exists, but that God is the supreme good, all other goods needing it, and all the other things that one believes about God. So this would be the promise that one not only believes, hopes for, but has actually worked out intellectually about what lies at the end for those who desire and work towards and rely upon God.